Greetings, curious students of the blade, and welcome back to the channel. Lightsaber combat is the bread and butter of force-wielding beings. As the signature weapon of both the Jedi and Sith, these two factions developed many ways of wielding a lightsaber to achieve the most optimal outcome for their respective user. Jedi and Sith mostly used the same lightsaber forms, but had vastly different rules on how those forms should be utilized. For the Sith, it was all about cutting down an enemy as fast as possible, and sometimes as cruelly as possible. Asserting dominance in a lightsaber duel was a mark of strength and true victory to those who served the dark side. For the Jedi, it was all about disarming or incapacitating an enemy in the most effective way possible while minimizing casualties and falling back on death as an absolute last resort. Protecting life at all costs, even the life of your enemy, was the way of the light side, though with both of these ideologies, there come certain expectations when one takes up a blade for their cause. And today, Acolytes, we'll be looking at a couple of the techniques and forms that were looked down upon or even outright forbidden by most saber wielders. Before we begin though, we noticed that a few of you using our archives have yet to subscribe, so if you enjoy all of the up-to-date information on Star Wars like this, be sure to slice that subscribe button. Now, get your training partner and have your saber at the ready, because now we begin. Starting out, we want to talk about two lightsaber forms, not exactly techniques, but outright forms altogether that were viewed with controversy by the Jedi as well as the Sith. These two forms respectively are Vader and Tracata. We have made full-length videos about these forms before, so if you want more information about them, be sure to look at those. Vader was a Jedi variant of the Sith lightsaber form of Form 7 known as Juya. As some of you may know, Juya was not so much of a lightsaber form as it was a state of mind. Its sequences were very difficult to master when you didn't have the right mental setting. You see, Form 7 was one that expressly uses the user's emotion to fuel their blade in combat, allowing for wild, unpredictable strikes and sudden explosions of movement. The preferred form of Darth Sidious and Darth Maul, Juya was pretty much the staple of Sith combat and was completely forbidden for any Jedi to use as a direct affront of the Jedi Code. However, Vader fixes this problem. Created by Mace Windu, Vader doesn't use one's own emotions to channel into their blade strikes, but rather uses their opponent's emotions against them. This requires one to bring their own feelings to the surface, just barely going to the edge without tipping over to the dark side. In effect, Vader reflects the opponent's darkness against them. This was an incredibly risky form to use though, as it demands for Vader flirting with the dark side far beyond what many Jedi are comfortable with, causing many Jedi that saw Mace Windu use this to become concerned. After all, the fall of the Jedi Master Sora Bulk was due to the nature of Vader, Sora Bulk being the co-creator of the form who helped develop it along with Mace Windu. Mace Windu has since refused to teach the form to any other Jedi, and it was outlawed by the Jedi Council unless Mace Windu's own discretion allowed some to train in it. To put it simply, Vader is a unique lightsaber variant as both the Jedi and Sith hated it together. The Jedi believed that it went too far, and the Sith believed that it was a facsimile and an imitation, and that it did not go far enough. The other lightsaber form that both the Jedi and Sith hated was Tracata. Tracata was less of a form and more of a technique. It was the act of taking advantage of a lightsaber's ability to switch on and off, and doing so in the middle of a duel. For instance, one might pretend to go for an attack as an opponent is beginning to block it. One would then switch off their lightsaber, effectively bypassing the defenses of their opponent, and then reignite the blade into a vulnerable opponent's body. As you can imagine, the Jedi despised and dissuaded their students from using such a technique. The Jedi deemed it against their very code and unsportsmanlike. Ironically though, the Sith also despised this move, as they saw it as a cheap trick and a symbol of weakness. In the Sith's eyes, a true Sith Lord should be able to overpower an opponent with their strength in the dark side or skill with the blade, and using such a dirty trick was beneath even them. Funny enough, Tracata was actually invented by an unknown Jedi consular during the Old Republic era. Jedi consulars were mostly known for studying the Force, not the blade, and their philosophy of the wider galaxy, and not so much focusing at all on lightsaber combat. I imagine the consular found himself in an unexpected duel with a Sith, where the consular was totally outmatched at the blade, and was about to die or have someone else nearly killed. In the heat of the moment, the Jedi likely switched off his lightsaber right as the Sith attacked, causing him to stumble before the consular reignited his lightsaber into his enemy's back. After seeing how effective it was, he created an entire series of techniques around this idea, calling it Tracata. This story though is mostly speculation on our behalf. However, I do believe that this is a probable guess for its invention. Nevertheless, it is interesting how the Jedi and Sith come together on this one principle that despises its effectiveness. Tracata was a cheap and a dirty way to dispatch an opponent regardless of the scenario. However, this didn't stop a few Jedi from using these tricks from time to time when it best suited them, despite what the Jedi Masters and Councils had to say about it. Now within our video though, we are going to get into some moves which have to do with the marks of contact in lightsaber combat. You see, the way that the Jedi and Sith teach swordplay is divided into 9 different body zones, and the naming of each of these marks of contact on the body are different. From here, this is how they build their lightsaber techniques and form. But as you know, there are a few marks of contact that were looked down upon, and even one that was outright forbidden by use for a Jedi. The Jedi strive to ensure that if a fight was unavoidable, then it would have to be ended quickly and mercifully. As such, many of their preferred marks of contact made sure to focus on disarming an opponent, but if an opponent's death had to happen, then they would attempt to do it as painlessly as possible. This is where we get a technique that was actually despised by the Sith, but used by the Jedi, known as Cho Mai. Cho Mai was the mark of contact right at the wrist of an opponent's weapon hand, the favored point of contact for a Jedi. Cho Mai was the ideal way to end a fight, as the Jedi saw it as a merciful conclusion to any duel. By severing the opponent's hand, it effectively rendered the opponent unable to continue but still alive. Many Sith on the receiving end of Cho Mai were left full of hatred and a missing hand, whilst also denied a glorified death and forced into humiliation of surrender and imprisonment by a Jedi. The Sith barely taught Cho Mai to their own apprentices, as they saw it to be completely useless. The fact is, if a Sith has decided to engage in combat, they don't intend for their opponent to be left alive. Due to this, any stroke that they make with their lightsaber is to be a killing blow and nothing less. The next mark of contact was highly looked down upon by the Jedi, and likely had to land you in hot water with the Council. This was known as Psi Talk. Psi Talk was the mark of contact at the waist, which would completely bisect an opponent into 2 pieces. In the book The Path of the Jedi, the Battlemaster, Gark Vonk, had this to say about Psi Talk. This act is rightly considered to be barbaric and evidence of furious emotions of the dark side. Unless you're fighting droids, no student of mine should ever use Psi Talk. As you may already know, this is the exact technique that Obi-Wan Kenobi used as a Padawan against Darth Maul at the end of their duel that we saw in The Phantom Menace, and of course the result of Maul being cut in half. It's important to note that Maul survived this, but was in incredible agony afterward. So much pain, even though he used his Sith training to survive, it still cost him his very sanity. Psi Talk is not a merciful technique at all, which rendered it to be a preferred mark of contact by the Sith. They very much enjoyed this maneuver because they knew that using this on an opponent would not kill them immediately and leave them in great pain for a few moments before they ultimately succumbed to their injuries. The Sith invented a vertical form of Psi Talk that would see the user bisecting an opponent from the top down, making it one of the most deadly and looked down upon techniques in the Jedi Order. And finally, the last technique that we will be looking at today is a technique that was officially stamped by the Jedi High Council as a forbidden move. Once again, this was a move used by Obi-Wan Kenobi during his duel on Mustafar, known as Mo-Ki. Mo-Ki was the act of severing several limbs in one single sweep of the blade against an opponent, in a circular motion, taking out as many limbs as possible. Obi-Wan would perform a triple Mo-Ki on Anakin Skywalker, leaving him on the beach to die afterwards. Mo-Ki was forbidden as it was deemed to be completely unnecessary given the many other options of contact available for a Jedi to use. Obi-Wan was forced to use Mo-Ki as there was literally no other option on Mustafar, as Anakin had become far too powerful to continue fighting him. The only way to end it was to use his arrogance against him and pull off a move that would render him completely unable to fight as well as catch him off guard. When you really think about it, no real other option was available for Obi-Wan Kenobi at the time. If Obi-Wan had allowed Anakin to land, then he would have been annihilated, and Obi-Wan couldn't yet just outright kill him when he was in midair. The only option was to take him out of commission entirely. Thus, Mo-Ki was needed. It is interesting though that two of the forbidden techniques of lightsaber combat that we've discussed today were both used by what many consider to be the pinnacle of the Jedi in Obi-Wan. But anyway, my friends and Blade Masters, what do you think of these taboo techniques? Do you think that they are rightfully shunned, or do you think it's important to just use whatever works in the moment if you are a Jedi? Let us know your thoughts down below, and if you choose mercy and honor, or if you choose survival and victory. Until next time, students of the Force, may the Force be with you, and have a great day.